Welcome to the Bronx Journal. I'm your guest host, Marcos Cabrera. Do you own an iPod, a Zune, or another kind of MP3 player? Do you experience your music to the fullest by blasting the volume to the maximum level? Do you get an extra sense of excitement when your headphones are about to explode? Well, my friend, you might be developing a serious problem. Here on the show today, Dr. Sandra Levey will warn us and discuss the problems that occur when your music player is tuned too high. Professor, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, Professor, what are the dangers of listening to your MP3 player at a high volume?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for people to understand what a high volume is. Let's talk about noise. Now, some of the loudest noises that we experience, we hear jackhammers, and believe it or not, jackhammers, rock music, are extremely loud. The subway, car horns are loud. What's not loud? Ordinary conversation. So ordinary conversation is at about 60 decibels. Decibels is a measure of sound pressure and loudness. So 60 decibels is ordinary conversation. 30 decibels is a whisper. And then you've got your jackhammer, rock music, firearms. The danger is by listening to music at a very high volume, somewhere around where a subway, rock music, that loud, what you're doing is you're affecting the sensory cells in the inner ear. Those are the receptors of sound, and they take the sound, the sound that you hear in the world, and they transmit that sound to the brain. And if these sensory cells are exposed to noise, to toxic noise, too loud, playing a music too loud, they lose their energy. And if this continues over a long period of time, listening to music too loud, too long, these cells will die. And this is irreparable damage.
So what do you say is a safe listening level?
A safe listening level. My colleague at Harvard, Dr. Brian Fleegler, has done a lot of work in iPods and music and loudness, and he's established what's called the 80-90 rule. You listen at about 80 decibels. Now, if you use the measures that I gave you, ordinary conversation is about 60, and a subway is about 90. So if you go somewhere in between those two levels, you're safe. But it isn't just how loud you listen, it's how long you listen. So you're safe if you're listening at about 80 decibels. So you take your player, bring it to about 80% of its maximum sound level, and listen for about 90 minutes, and you're safe. So just remembering the 80-90 rule, you're safe.
Will a certain level of volume have the same effect on all people?
We don't know. We know that some people are affected more than others, but we don't know who you are. So we all have to be careful, because we don't know who the person is who's going to lose their hearing and who isn't.
Well, what groups of people are in most danger of experiencing hearing loss or other damages?
Well, this is of great importance to me because I'm a speech-language pathologist and a linguist. And I have done a lot of research into the effects of noise on hearing. What the effect, I should mention, is called noise-induced hearing loss, NIHL, noise-induced hearing loss. The group that's most affected are children. And why are children affected? Because they're in the process of learning. They're in a classroom and they have to hear the classroom teacher. They have to absorb the information, the spoken information. And I just want to let you know that even a small, now remember, a whisper is about 30 decibels. So think of something even smaller than that, 10 decibels. A loss of 10 decibels will cut the speech signal in half. So the children are at risk because if they can't hear what the teacher is saying in the classroom, and let me tell you, the greatest effect is on reading, because children have to hear the spoken language in order to establish the sounds they hear, and then to make a connection between the sounds and the written words on a page in order to read. So we find that kids who even have a mild hearing loss are kids who have trouble reading, they have low reading scores, they may repeat grades. Now, there's another danger. The beginning of a noise-induced hearing loss in children starts with a minimal hearing loss. And a minimal hearing loss is very hard to detect. A teacher will miss it, a parent may miss it. And these are kids who are most at risk, and that's why it's important to protect them.
So what can parents or teachers do to help protect these kids from hearing loss?
There are a number of things that they can do. First of all, you can establish the fact that not being loud is cool. In other words, being loud is considered cool. Professor Sandra Levey, who's a sociology professor, has done a lot of work in examining the literature on iPods, and she's found that college-age students rate listening to iPods as the coolest leisure time activity that they can do. So what you have to do is you have to battle that social factor. It's a social factor, so people want to be cool. So you have to establish that it's also very cool not to be loud. So a parent can go through the home, turn down everything, turn down the TV, turn down the music, and tell everyone why they're doing it. You could go to well, first of all, movie theaters, go to a movie theater, and remember, safe listening is 80 decibels. Many movies are 90 decibels and higher. And be aware that video games are sometimes as high as 135 decibels. Rock music, equally high. So that means that you have to use protection. When you're going into a concert, if you're going to be in a video gallery, in any of those activities, you have to use protection for your ears. You could go to the parents could get together and go to the movie theater. Many action movies are around 90 decibels. Remember, safe is 80. Okay, so talking to the theater about lowering the sound level, that's another thing they can do. You can give your child protection for their ears if they're going to be anywhere around firearms, any kind of noise. The other things you can do is education, education programs in classrooms, education programs in colleges, elementary schools. There was a study done in 1992, and I'm sure the numbers are more serious, but in 1992 they found that there was an increase in hearing loss in second graders. It was a 2.8. The percentage had increased 2.8 for the second graders. That's serious.
That's serious.
Now, you also have to remember that there are about 30 million people in the U.S. who have hearing loss. There are about 50 million others who have something called tinnitus, which is you get a kind of ringing in your ears. And that's the first sign of the beginnings of a noise-induced hearing loss. And there are about 5 million, 6 to 19 years of age, who have hearing loss that's been directly tied to listening to music, too loud, too long.
Now, what is the U.S. doing? Is the U.S. doing anything about this? Is the government helping out in any way? I mean, you know, they kind of let us, they give us these devices. So what are they doing to help?
Well, companies give us the devices, but you're asking, does the government do anything to educate? Well, the Centers for Disease Control has instituted a hot topics that addresses this problem. However, other countries, I'll give you an example of the Scandinavian countries. Sweden, for example, has an education program on safe listening that begins at elementary school, goes to middle school and high school. The interesting thing is that teenagers in Sweden, 90% of them use protection when they go to rock concerts. What do you think the percentage is in the United States?
It has to be high. I mean, I wouldn't guess.
10%.
10%.
So you have 90% where education goes on, 10% with little education. But there are there's more interest, there's more awareness of the effects of noise, and so many of us are trying to do education programs.
We'll have more on this interesting subject when we come back. Stay tuned for the Bronx Journal.